All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to dive deep into the world of Bob Camblin.
Bob Camblin.
This guy, he's an artist who's earned a ton of respect in the art world. I mean, serious respect. His pieces are highly sought after, but, he's not exactly a household name.
Right.
His art doesn't pop up all that often.
No.
But when it does, it commands some pretty impressive prices.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with this guy?
Well, I think to really get into Camblin for this deep dive, we've got a pretty amazing set of sources here.
Yeah.
First off, we've got Bob Camblin quotes and other mysteries, which gives us a pretty direct line into, how he thought.
Right into his head.
And then we have the Bob Camblin biography, which kind of lays out, the timeline of his life, the context.
Oh, TK.
We've also got a bunch of book reviews and forewords, all related to his art, a YouTube transcript that dives into his piece, Postcards from Tir Nanog, which is super interesting.
Interesting time.
And then just some general historical info, including reviews and quotes about the artist. So a lot to work with here.
Yeah, sounds like we've got a lot to unpack. So, as always, what we're going to do is pull out the most important bits from all these materials, all these sources for you.
Exactly.
We want to figure out what shaped Camblin's artistic vision, like what made him tick and trace his journey, how he evolved as an artist.
Yeah.
And he was, without a doubt, a complex guy.
Absolutely.
His art reflects that.
Yeah. And it's worth noting the range of his work, too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he worked in oils, acrylics, watercolors, drawings, prints, even painted paper. And on top of that, his lifestyle, he was pretty nomadic.
He moved around.
Really had a big impact on his themes and styles.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning.
All right.
Bob Camblin, born in Oklahoma, 1928.
Oklahoma.
Goes on to study at the Kansas City Art Institute.
Kansas City.
But his education, that didn't stop there, did it?
Oh, not at all. A really key moment for him was getting a Fulbright scholarship to Italy.
Okay, yeah.
This totally changed him. He said he was mesmerized by the grand masters, those artists who are all about representing the world realistically of representative art and impressionism, those focused on capturing light and fleeting moments, places like the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the Catacombe di Cappuccini in Palermo. Those really stuck with him.
Those left a mark.
He even used a very specific term for the images he saw in Palermo. He called them mummies, these lasting, almost preserved images. It really shows how much those artistic encounters meant to him.
Mummies.
Yeah.
That's such a vivid way to put it.
Yeah.
It really drives home the impact.
Absolutely.
So it's like they were preserved in his memory. But before diving headfirst into art, he actually had a pretty different career path.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't straight line to becoming an artist.
Before becoming a teacher, Camblin worked as a map maker for TWA.
A map maker.
Yeah. Makes you wonder if needing to be so precise and detailed in that work maybe had some influence, even subconsciously, on the really meticulous lines you see in some of his later drawings.
It's interesting to think about.
And then, of course, he did go on to have a pretty significant teaching career at all kinds of different places, like the Ringling School of Art, the University of Illinois, University of Detroit, even Rice University later on. So, he was really involved in shaping the next generation of artists while his own artistic ideas were developing.
So he's got this whole academic life influencing all these young artists.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, his personal artistic vision is, taking shape in the background.
Right.
Let's shift gears a bit and focus on his early years. Let's talk about Ponca City, Oklahoma.
Ponca City.
Where he grew up. What was it like, growing up there in the 30s and 40s as a young artist?
Well, growing up in Ponca City back then, that was a real formative experience for him.
I bet.
The biography paints this picture of a town in the Marland era before TV was everywhere, limited radio, ice boxes, like a totally different pace of life.
Yeah.
Grand Avenue was the place to be, and the town had a certain cultural energy, a lot of which was tied to the rise and fall of the Marland Estate.
And the Marland Estate, along with that famous pioneer woman statue, they seem to have meant a lot to Camblin, right?
Absolutely. The biography mentions that everyone growing up in Ponca City knew about these landmarks.
They were proud of him.
They were proud of the cultural status they gave the town.
Right.
There's even this fascinating detail. Some of Camblin's paintings, if you look really closely, they subtly include elements of the pioneer woman.
Okay.
Sometimes with double VVs, which was his personal code for his mother, Viva Camblin.
Interesting.
It's like he wove his own personal history into those town symbols.
That's a beautiful connection. His personal life finding its way into those public symbols. And even beyond those broader influences, he was starting to kind of explore his own artistic side early on.
Yeah. He was the art director for his high school yearbook.
Oh, wow.
So already showing that dedication to visual expression.
Early signs.
And it's also interesting to note his friendship with Forrest Harrisberger.
Yep.
They met in a high school art class, and they stayed friends for over 60 years. They even went to the Kansas City Art Institute together and spent some time in the Air Force Reserve during the Korean War. It seems like those early bonds and shared experiences in art were really important to him.
Yeah, it sounds like those formative relationships played a big part in his development as an artist.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just visual stuff that influenced him. Camblin was a big reader, too.
Oh, huge reader. The biography really emphasizes his diverse reading habits, mentioning Emerson, the I Ching, and especially haiku and haiga.
Haiku and haiga.
That simplicity in haiga, the way it captures these profound observations about everyday life,
Yeah.
combining haiku poetry and visual art, that seemed to really resonate with him.
I can see that.
It's almost like he was striving for that same kind of elegance and distilled beauty in his own art.
So we've got these early influences. The classical masters,
Right.
his Oklahoma roots, these close friendships, and then this deep engagement with literature and Eastern philosophy.
Yeah.
But then there's a major turning point. He decides to leave his comfy academic career behind.
Right. In 1976, Camblin makes a big move. He ditches his secure academic position and goes all in on being a nomadic artist, traveling all over the place.
That's a bold move.
It's not just a change of scenery. It signals a real shift in his goals as an artist.
So what was he trying to achieve with this new way of life, this new way of creating art?
Well, the sources suggest his art started to move beyond the usual art world stuff, art criticism, the commercial side of things.
He wanted to break free.
It seems like he was searching for a more direct connection with the viewer, something that spoke to their inner world, something that didn't need a ton of intellectual analysis.
Raw emotion.
He supported himself through sales and commissions, drawing inspiration from all the different cultures and landscapes he encountered.
From all over the world.
Italy, France, Ireland, Mexico, even the South Pacific. It's like he was cutting out the middleman and connecting directly with people through his art.
Just pure, unfiltered expression. It sounds like he was after a more authentic way of making art, free from all those academic and commercial pressures. And this also led to some cool collaborations, right?
Yeah, totally. He was a big believer in collaboration.
Okay.
He formed B&E Productions with Earl Staley and Joe Tate.
Other artists.
They put on these collaborative shows and events that really challenged traditional ideas about art and who created it.
Yeah.
They were all about the creative process itself.
The act of creation.
And maybe the most telling thing is that he often signed his work as anonymous or anonymous artists.
And
It's like he wanted to move past individual ego and towards a more collective, even universal form of expression. What do you think about that, the anonymity? Was it just about downplaying the ego, or could there have been other reasons, about how he wanted his work to be seen?
that's a great question. It makes you wonder if he was trying to make the work the focus, separate from any preconceived notions about the artist. It's like he wanted the art to speak for itself.
Yeah.
Now let's dig into how his style evolved
Yeah.
and look at some of the themes that keep popping up in his work. We know he started out with some pieces that had a social message,
Right. His early stuff in the 1950s often dealt with social protest.
making a statement.
Strong outlines, big flat areas of color. By the mid-50s, he's starting to mix social realism with more abstract elements to explore, like the realm of human symbols. He was really into the draftsmanship of Cremoni and those figures in Etruscan terracotta. So even early on, you see this push and pull between depicting the world around him and delving into these more abstract concepts.
His back and forth between the external and the internal.
Exactly.
And then the 1980s hit, and he develops this unique style called mouches volantes.
Mouches volantes.
Tell me more about that.
Mouches volantes means flying flies in French. You know, those little things you sometimes see floating in your vision?
Yeah.
It was something he developed with Nancy Giordano. They used dots and dashes to create optical illusions, messing with how you see the image.
Playing tricks on the eye.
The biography compares it to artists like M.C. Escher and Salvador Dali, who also explored visual perception, that blurring of reality and illusion.
Right, right.
With Musha Volantes, he's not just playing games with your vision. He's making a point about how our minds construct reality from all these little bits of sensory input. It's a really insightful commentary on how we perceive the world.
Absolutely. He's making us aware of the very act of seeing.
Yeah.
Now, beyond those specific styles, were there any recurring themes or images that he kept coming back to?
There are a few that pop up a lot. Scarecrows are a big one.
Scarecrows, okay.
He got the idea from Gunter Grass's novel Dog Years, and they often represent spring, renewal, metamorphosis, this idea of transformation. That seems to be a key thing for him. Gloves, machined objects, and the whole theme of metamorphosis, those are all over his work. And then there's this figure, Saint Bambola.
Saint Bambola, who's that?
It's described as a ghost that kind of haunted his creative process.
A ghost.
He even felt like he had to consciously stop using this figure's mythology in his work at one point.
That's interesting.
It suggests it had a really deep personal meaning for him.
Almost like it was too powerful.
Yeah.
And he also had this unusual way of incorporating text into his drawings.
Right. The text in Camblin's drawings isn't really there to tell you something directly. He used words as shapes, like visual elements. Sometimes they're clues, sometimes they're meant to throw you off.
To mislead you.
The biography mentions that he agreed with Tom Wolfe's idea in The Painted Word, this idea that the talk about art can overshadow the art itself.
Yeah.
Camblin seemed to be playing with that, making the text another piece of the visual puzzle, not necessarily something that explains the work.
He's really making us think about how we interpret art. He's challenging us. And there's also this idea of turning stumbling blocks into stepping stones that shows up in his work. How did he visually represent that?
He often used paintings of jars of water to get that idea across.
Jars of water.
It's this metaphor about letting things settle, letting the water clear so you can see the path forward. What seems like an obstacle can actually become a way to move forward. He said, let the water clear, see the path, unravel the game, and move up the step rather than stumbling.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about finding opportunity in the midst of challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's mentioned that he wanted to remake Goya in 20th century terms.
Remake Goya.
That's pretty ambitious. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, it shows that he wanted to grapple with the human condition in a really deep, often unsettling way, like Goya did back in his time,
Right.
but using the artistic language of the 20th century.
Speaking to a modern audience.
Right. It also highlights his desire to question our everyday ideas about reality, pushing beyond even what the surrealists were doing. He wasn't content with conventional ways of seeing things. He wanted to dig deeper into these more imaginative realms, to really provoke thought and challenge perceptions in a way that would resonate with people today.
So he wasn't afraid to push boundaries and make people uncomfortable.
Not at all.
Now let's zoom in on one specific piece. Postcards from Tir na nog.
Postcards.
The YouTube transcript gives us some great insights into this watercolor.
It does. The watercolor shows these floating rectangular shapes, kind of like postcards.
Okay.
They're set against this deep, rich blue background.
Like a night sky.
Some of the postcards are abstract with swirling colors, while others have more recognizable things, like a building with a red roof that's supposed to be the artist's studio, an alien-looking face, a distorted eye, and these swirling patterns.
And the title itself, Postcards from Tir na nog, that's loaded with meaning. For those who might not know, what exactly is Tir na nog?
Tir na nog is this mythical Irish land of eternal youth and beauty.
Paradise.
Kind of paradise. So the postcards in the painting, they're like souvenirs from a trip to this fantastical, maybe even spiritual realm.
Little glimpses into another world. And the studio, that red-roofed building, that's a recurring symbol for Camblin, right?
Yeah, it represents a portal or a creative base where these imaginative journeys begin.
A starting point for exploration. And the way those postcards are scattered all over the painting, that's interesting too. What do you think that signifies?
Well, the YouTube transcript suggests those scattered postcards are like fragmented memories.
Bits and pieces.
And they point to this idea that you can't capture ultimate truth in a single image, in a single moment.
It's always incomplete.
Each postcard holds a piece of the puzzle, but none of them show the whole picture. This connects to the idea of Zen enlightenment, which isn't seen as an end goal, but more like an ongoing process of discovery and understanding things bit by bit.
It's about the journey, not the destination. And that really fits with what we've been talking about, that sense of seeking and questioning that runs through Camblin's work. The deep blue background, that's an important element too, right?
Oh, definitely. It's linked to hexagram 29 of the I Ching, the abysmal water. It symbolizes the unknown, the feeling of diving into deep waters and navigating uncertainty.
Taking the leap of faith.
The dark blue becomes this vast, mysterious ocean, and the postcards are like messages floating on the currents. You don't know where they'll end up. It adds to the mystery, this idea that absolute knowledge is elusive.
It's about embracing the unknown. And it sounds like this painting really brings together a lot of Camblin's core ideas about how we understand things and how the creative process works. There's also this emphasis on patience, if I'm remembering right.
You are. The transcript talks about how important patience is, how you have to let meaning unfold naturally instead of trying to force it. It fits with Taoist and Zen principles, letting things arise on their own. The wisdom of Tir no Nog, it reveals itself when you stop trying so hard to understand everything right away.
It's about letting go and trusting the process.
Exactly.
So it's not about instantly decoding every symbol, but about letting those symbols resonate with you and gradually change how you see things. And this connects to the ephemeral nature of wisdom itself, the idea that you can bring back fragments of insight from these mystical realms, but you can't hold on to them forever.
Right. We might get these glimpses of enlightenment, these profound moments, but we can't grasp them completely or permanently.
They slip away.
The postcards are reminders, messages from beyond, but they're not the final destination. The transcript even encourages the listener to think about their own postcards from the unconscious mind, those flashes of insight and clarity we all experience sometimes.
It's like paying attention to those intuitive feelings, those half-formed thoughts that we usually ignore.
Yeah.
Now, Camblin also explored these ideas in his books, Zen and the Art of Enlightenment.
Zen and the Art of Enlightenment.
The reviews and forewords in our sources give us some insight into those too.
They do. The book is described as a conversation between art and philosophy. The drawings are seen as paradoxes made visible, even Zen koans disguised as blueprints. Zen koans are those paradoxical riddles or stories used in Zen Buddhism to make you think outside the box.
To challenge your assumptions.
So Camblin's drawings become visual tools for breaking free from conventional thinking.
Tools for expanding your mind. And what are some of the themes he explores in these books?
Well, he talks a lot about traps, fear traps, time traps, traps we create for ourselves, and the importance of stillness and how everything is interconnected. The foreword to Volume 1 draws these connections between the history of art and the ideas in Zen and the I Ching, emphasizing intuition, interconnectedness, the cyclical nature of experience.
It's like he saw these ancient philosophies as woven into the fabric of art.
Yeah, exactly.
So art becomes more than just something to look at.
Right.
It becomes a way to learn about yourself and the world around you.
It's described as a portal to heightened awareness, a starting point for contemplation and self-reflection. The books aren't trying to give you all the answers.
They're more about asking the right questions.
They want to awaken an intuitive understanding in the viewer.
It's about sparking that inner knowing. And that brings us to this idea of everyday enlightenment that Camblin's art encourages. What does that mean?
It's about learning to see beauty in unexpected places.
Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Embracing the fact that things are always changing, discovering those moments of insight in everyday life. It's a way of understanding that comes from being open to different perspectives, challenging your usual assumptions.
It's like he's inviting us to slow down, pay attention, and see the world with fresh eyes. Now, let's come back to Camblin the man. The phrase iconoclastic and enigmatic artist comes up a lot. What was it about him that created this persona?
Well, it was a combination of things. His fierce independence, his willingness to break the rules of the art world, his nomadic lifestyle, and his art, which is often mysterious and layered.
Multifaceted.
The quotes from his peers really capture him. Pete Gershon calls him a mystical trickster figure.
A trickster figure.
George O. Jackson Jr. says his art is a portal, and Camblin himself is a distillation of art. Earl Staley emphasizes how he was this powerful creative force and a mentor.
Leaving a lasting impact.
Penny Serling talks about how much he questioned things and how much he loved collaborating, even with all the inevitable disagreements and laughter.
The joy of creation.
And Carolyn Farb sees his work as these autobiographical stories filled with joy.
So many different perspectives.
And Earl Staley tells this really touching story about their shared studio, their collaborations, and then how Camblin eventually vanished from Houston.
Vanish.
He talks about their time together in B&E productions, their exhibitions, like the tattoo show, which sounds amazing. Then Camblin moved with his wife Nancy to the Oregon coast and then to Louisiana. And that's when his friends in Houston lost touch with him. Staley mentions a brief, kind of awkward visit when Camblin came back, and then how his supporters really struggled to put together a retrospective of his work. It sounds like he intentionally created some distance, which definitely added to the mystery surrounding him.
Almost like he was slipping away from the grasp of the art world.
Yeah.
But even with that distance, he made a real mark on the Houston art scene, a mark that's still felt today.
Absolutely. He continues to inspire other artists. His dedication to his own unique vision, that really left a mark, even if it's hard to get a complete picture of all the work he did.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways about Bob Camblin?
Well, he was an artist who defied easy labels. His work was deeply personal and philosophical, embracing paradox and ambiguity as ways to understand the world.
Embracing the unknown.
He wasn't interested in giving you simple answers. He wanted to make you think, to spark your own journey of discovery. His art demands a different kind of engagement, one that values the process of exploration over finding quick answers.
It's about the journey, not the destination. And as a final thought for our listeners, what would you like them to consider as they think about Camblin and his art?
Maybe this. What postcards from your own inner Tir na Nog, those moments of insight, those intuitive flashes, those creative sparks, what wisdom might those hold for you? And how might embracing ambiguity and uncertainty in your own life, instead of always looking for definite answers, how might that actually enrich how you see the world?
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about being open to the mystery, to the unknown.
Yeah.
And if you're intrigued by Bob Camblin and his world, I encourage you to look up images of his art online or in museum collections if you can. Think about those themes of paradox, impermanence, and the interplay between what we see and what's hidden beneath the surface. Like Camblin, you might discover unexpected depths and connections. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. And remember, it's the exploration that matters most.
Yes.